At first there was no noise, there was only the man, and the weight, that weight you know, not with your mind, but with your body, that tightness in your chest that appears before you even open your eyes in the morning, that whisper that says, you are not enough, you're going to break, you always break, and then the day begins, and the world falls on you like stones. One word from a colleague, and you fall apart. A silence from the person you love, and you collapse. A situation out of your control, and suddenly you don't know who you are anymore. You who seemed so strong yesterday, you swore to yourself that this time would be different, but it wasn't. Listen, I need you to be very quiet now, because what I'm going to tell you wasn't written to pass the time. It was written to awaken something that is dormant inside you. Something that the world made a point of burying deeply under years of fear, of approval sought in the wrong places, of a strength that you lost without even realizing when. There was a man, not an ordinary man, although he had calloused hands and worn sandals like any other. This man walked on the dust of roads that the sun cracked in half. This man looked into the eyes of lepers that society had spat out. This man stood before scribes, Pharisees, governors, and angry crowds, and he did not back down. He didn't tremble. He did not beg for approval. He did not collapse when he was accused. It did not fall apart when they abandoned it. And most disturbing of all, he was human. Just like you, he was hungry. I was tired. There were nights when the weight was so great that the sweat flowed like blood. The Bible does not hide this. It embosses it with fire on the pages. Because this man's strength did not come from the absence of pain. It came from something much deeper, of something that is so well hidden in the Scriptures that 2,000 years of sermons have passed over without ever stopping to ask, how? How can a man be betrayed by his closest friend and yet serve him bread on the same table? How is a man publicly humiliated, scourged, spat upon, crowned with thorns, and yet finds within himself words of forgiveness? How does a dying man look up and still have the strength to console the dying next door? This is not religious piety. This is the most radical thing a human being can do. And modern psychology, with all its laboratories, its neurons, and its 10-year studies, is just beginning to understand what this man was already experiencing as breathing. Let me tell you about a specific night. It was a dark night in Gethsemane, the smell of old olive trees mixed with damp earth. The disciples slept, because the body gives way when the soul can't take it anymore. And Jesus was alone on his knees, with his face against the ground. The Bible says he prayed. But read it again. Read calmly. Read with your eyes open. He wasn't just asking. He was fighting an internal battle of a magnitude that no human being has ever faced before. He was looking directly at the worst-case scenario: betrayal, torture, death, abandonment, and consciously choosing not to flee. This has a name in neuroscience, it has a name in psychology, and it has a name in the Scriptures. And it's that name, that secret that's hidden among the verses we read too quickly, that will change the way you understand your own weakness. Because here's the truth that no one told you in Sunday school: Jesus was not strong despite the pain. He was strong through it. And the 6 secrets I'm going to reveal in this video aren't just spiritual teachings. They are internal architectures. They are structures that this man has built within himself, and that you can build too, brick by brick. Crisis by crisis, silence for silence. These secrets are not in the famous verses that everyone quotes. They are in the gestures, in the breaks, in the choices he made when no one was looking, and also in the choices he made when everyone else was. And when you finish that video, if you really listen to what I'm going to tell you, you'll understand why you still break. Not because you are weak, but because no one has ever shown you how to be strong in the right way, the way it was once taught, in a road dust. for a man that the world tried to erase and couldn't. Let's go in. The man who needed no applause. There were crowds. There were always crowds. Everywhere this man stepped, the ground seemed to shake under the weight of the people who followed him. Crawling patients, mothers who shouted their children's names, scribes who sharpened their tongues to destroy him, Romans who watched him with suspicion, disciples who barely understood what they were seeing. And in the midst of it all, in the midst of chaos, the pain of others, the political pressure, the collective expectation of an entire people, Jesus was doing something that no one around could do. He didn't need the approval of any of them. I'm not talking about arrogance. I'm not talking about coldness. I'm talking about something much rarer and much deeper. I'm talking about a man who had built within himself a center so solid, so rooted, that the outside noise simply couldn't move what was inside. Modern psychology has a name for this: internal validation. But scholarly textbooks describe in cold terms what the scriptures show with flesh and blood. Think with me. Remember the episode in which Jesus fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish? The crowd was ecstatic. They were ready to proclaim him king right there, in strength, in collective enthusiasm. It was the moment that any political leader would wait his entire life. And what did Jesus do? He left, alone, to the mount. He didn't stay to absorb the compliment. He didn't stay to enjoy the moment of glory. He didn't need that to feel whole. Now he thinks about the opposite. When the crowd turned, when the cries of Hosanna turned into crucify, when the same faces that acclaimed him called for his death, when the very disciples who swore to die with him ran and hid, he continued standing, not because I didn't feel it. The Bible makes it clear that he felt deeply, he felt everything, but feeling is not the same as being controlled by what you feel. And here is the first secret that Jesus lived and that almost no one noticed. His identity was not in the hands of anyone else. Have you ever stopped to think about how much of your daily energy goes to managing what others think of you? How many decisions do you not make for fear of judgment? How many words do you swallow so as not to displease? How many fake versions of yourself do you put out into the world just to make sure people will like what they're seeing? Neuroscience calls this dopaminergic dependence on social approval. Your brain has been trained, since you were a child, to associate approval with confidence. When someone compliments you, dopamine. When someone criticizes you, cortisol. When someone ignores you, anxiety. You have become an emotional beggar, and I didn't even know. But Jesus was not a beggar. He was rich from within. In Luke 4, right at the beginning of his ministry, the devil himself tests just that. 3 temptations, and all 3, if you look closely, are not about power, hunger, or glory. All 3 are about identity. If you are the Son of God, the text repeats twice. It is a direct provocation to the sense of identity. Prove who you are. Show it to me. Show them. And Jesus did not fall, not because he had ready answers on the tip of his tongue, but because he already knew who he was, so completely, so deeply, that there was nothing that an external provocation could shake. Now look at your life. When someone teases you, at work, at home, on social media, what happens inside you? Do you feel that immediate urge to defend yourself, to prove, to react? This impulse is the sign that your identity is still outside of you. It is still in the hands of others. He is still at the mercy of world opinion. The strength of Jesus began here, not in miracles, not in the powerful words. It started with the fact that he woke up every day knowing exactly who he was, and that didn't depend on any crowd confirming it. The most important work you can do in your life is not to achieve more. It is to build a center. A place inside you that doesn't bend when the wind hits. A place that doesn't collapse when criticism arrives. A place that doesn't dry out when the compliment disappears. That place exists in you. It has just never been inhabited. Jesus inhabited this place full time, and the result was a presence that people felt before he even opened his mouth, an authority that did not come from position, title, approval. It came from within, of an identity so consolidated that the world around it simply could not destabilize it. This is the first pillar, and it is the foundation of everything that comes after, because none of the other practices work if you are still building your self-esteem on the shaky ground of other people's opinions. Before moving on, he stops for a second. Ask yourself, the last time I felt shaken, was it because of something that happened, or because of what I thought others would think about what happened? The answer will tell you a lot about where your identity is being stored. The power to stop when everything screams to continue. There's a scene in the scriptures that most people read too quickly to realize what's really going on. Jesus had just done something extraordinary. He had healed people, taught crowds for hours, faced the religious pressure of the Pharisees, and still had the disciples pulling his arm in all directions. The day had been exhausting on the deepest level, not only the body, but the soul. And then, when the sun began to go down and people expected it to continue, to give more, to stay a little longer, Mark 1:35 records with devastating simplicity. Early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus arose, went out, and went to a lonely place, and there he prayed. He left. He didn't wait for the day to end. He didn't wait for everyone to be served. He did not wait for the agenda to run out. He just went. Deliberately, intentionally, as someone who knows that there is something more urgent than continuing. And what did he do in that deserted place, in the dark, alone? Silence. Not the silence that happens when there is no more noise. The silence you choose in the midst of the noise. This is the rarest kind of silence there is, and also the most powerful. Most of us live in a relationship of terror with silence. He takes out his cell phone before getting out of bed. Put on music in the shower. Leave the TV on just for the noise. There are headphones in your ear at the gym, on the bus, at lunch. Any breach of silence and anxiety enters. Do you know why? Because in silence, you hear yourself. And what you hear when you stop being distracted is often scary. Thoughts you don't want to think about, emotions that you pushed under the rug, questions about your life that you don't have the courage to answer. The constant noise is not entertainment, it's anesthesia. Jesus did not use anesthesia. He went to silence in a regular, deliberate way, like someone who goes to fetch water from a fountain, not because it was easy, because it was necessary. And there, in that space, without an audience, without demand, without expectation, he replenished himself with something that no crowd could offer. Neuroscience today knows what happens in the brain during periods of intentional silence. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for judgment, decision-making, emotional regulation, literally rewires. The parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, reducing cortisol, restoring cardiac coherence, reorganizing memories and emotions. In short, the brain fixes itself, but only when you stop. And stopping is, ironically, the hardest thing to do in a world that rewards you for always being busy. Being busy has become a virtue. I'm full of commitments has become a symbol of importance. The busy schedule became proof of value, and the result, an entire generation of people who don't know how to be alone with themselves for more than 3 minutes without collapsing. Jesus knew how to be alone, and this ability was directly proportional to his stability in public. Think about it. The most powerful moments of his ministry, the densest speeches, the most precise gestures, always came after periods of recollection. Before choosing the 12 disciples, he spent the whole night in prayer on the mountain. Before the Transfiguration, recollection. Before the Last Supper, prayer in the garden. Before the cross, Gethsemane. It was no coincidence. It was structure. It was method. Silence wasn't an escape from reality. It was the place where he went to have enough clarity to face reality with force. And here's what no one taught you. You don't break because of too many problems. You break for lack of silence. You break because you live processing everything at the speed of the world and never stop to integrate, digest, reorganize what is inside you. Each unprocessed emotion becomes a burden. Every decision made in chaos becomes a regret. Each word said in exhaustion turns into a conflict that will last for weeks. Silence is not a waste of time. It is where time multiplies. Jesus taught in the synagogues with an authority that left everyone speechless. The scribes were impressed because he spoke as one in authority, not as other teachers. What they were seeing was the result of hours of inner depth that no one had witnessed. The clarity that appeared in public was the daughter of the silence cultivated in private. Do you want to have more clarity in your decisions, more presence in your relationships, more weight in your words? The way is not to learn more techniques, it's stopping more. It is to create space where before there was only noise. Jesus was not unshaken despite stopping. It was unshakable because it stopped. And while the whole world ran, he knew that the greatest revolution does not begin in the streets. It begins in the silence of a deserted place, before dawn, when no one is looking. How he looked at those who everyone ignored. There is a detail in the scriptures that most people overlook. A small gesture, almost invisible. But when you begin to notice it, it appears everywhere. And it completely changes how you understand who Jesus was. He stopped. In a world in motion, in a world of crowds, of haste, of schedule, of expectation, he stopped, and he looked, not a passing glance. A glance at the arrival, like someone who finally sees what was there all along, waiting to be seen. In Luke 19, there is a scene that seems small, but is gigantic. Jesus is entering Jericho. The city is celebrating. Crowd in the streets. Everyone wanted to see the famous Galilean rabbi. And on a tree branch, hunched over, trying to hide in the view, is Zacchaeus, the city's most hated tax collector, a man who had chosen wealth and had lost his dignity, a man that no one touched, no one called, no one wanted close. And Jesus stops. Lift your eyes, and it says his name. Zacchaeus, come down quickly. Today I need to stay at your house. Not, you up there. Not a generic nod of courtesy. The name that the city had turned into a curse. And Zacchaeus came down, and everything changed. Think about what happens in the human brain when someone actually sees you. It doesn't rate you. It doesn't judge you. It doesn't use you. See you. It recognizes you as people, as someone who matters. Neuroscience calls this limbic resonance, the ability of one nervous system to co-regulate with another. When someone looks at you with genuine presence, your nervous system responds. Cortisol drops. The amygdala relaxes. The sense of threat decreases. You literally feel safer inside your own body. Jesus did this with a precision that had nothing technical and everything real. He saw the woman bent over for 18 years that no one else saw in the middle of the synagogue. He saw lepers living outside the city walls, forbidden to have human contact. He saw the woman who touched the hem of his cloak in despair, in the midst of a crowd pressing on him from all sides. And he stopped. He stopped in the middle of the chaos to ask, "Who touched me?" The disciples were confused. "Master, the whole crowd is pressing on you, and you ask who touched you." But Jesus knew the difference between the mechanical contact of a crowd and the desperate touch of a soul for help. He felt the difference, and he didn't let it go. That's attention, from a level that almost doesn't exist anymore. We live in the age of distraction. Half of the conversations happen with a person looking at the cell phone screen. Half of the meetings have someone thinking about the next meeting. Half of the family meals have someone absent even though they are sitting at the table. Are you present? Or are you just physically occupying a space while your mind is elsewhere? Genuine presence is one of the most radical gestures that a human being can offer to another, and also one of the rarest, because genuine presence costs something. It costs your attention, which is the most precious possession you have. Jesus did not divide the attention. When he was with someone, he was entirely with that person. And this created something that people called in different ways. Some called it a miracle, others called it authority, others were silent without knowing the right name. The right name is to be seen. And being seen, genuinely, deeply seen, heals things that no medicine can achieve. But there is another layer to this second secret that goes beyond how Jesus treated others. There is what this level of attention says about his inner state. You can only see others when you are not completely lost in your own thoughts. You can only stop to look when you are not being swept away by the current of your own anxiety. Jesus' presence with others was a direct reflection of his presence with himself. He wasn't distracted internally. That is why he could be present externally. And here's the mirror that this subtitle puts in front of you. When was the last time you looked at someone, really did, without thinking about what you were going to answer, what had happened before, or what you needed to do next? When was the last time you gave someone the simplest and most powerful gift there is, your entire presence? Jesus taught that what you do to the least of the brethren, you do to him. But there is a psychological layer to this phrase that goes beyond morals. There is the truth that how you treat the unseen reveals what is at the core of who you are, not what you post, not what you say in meetings. What do you do when no one is looking and someone needs to be seen? This is the third pillar of an unshakable life, because a man who sees others with this depth is not trapped in himself. And a man who is not trapped in himself is free in a way that most people will never understand. The art of not reacting. When everything inside you wants to scream, they came to get him, not once, not in a discreet way. They came repeatedly, publicly, with carefully laid snares by men who devoted their entire lives to the study of the scriptures and the law. Intelligent men, articulate men, men who knew exactly where to squeeze to make a person collapse. Is it right to pay taxes to Caesar? The perfect question. He answers yes, and loses the people. He answers no, and is arrested by the Romans. A trap with no way out. And Jesus looked at the coin, and he said that phrase that 2,000 years later still resonates. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. It was not a dodge. It was an answer that operated at a level of depth that the question had not even imagined. And those who had set the trap went away in silence, astonished. But what almost no one realizes is what happened before the answer. He stopped. He asked for the coin. He looked. He thought. Only then did he speak. At no time was he taken by reactivity. At no time did the pressure of the situation make him speak before thinking. At no time did the desire to prove something, to defend himself, to win the argument control what came out of his mouth. This has a name. Neuroscience calls the response space, the interval between the stimulus and the reaction. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and one of the greatest psychologists of the 20th century, once said that in this space lies human freedom, the ability to choose how to respond rather than simply reacting automatically. Most people don't have that space, or it is so small that it is practically invisible. Someone says a crooked word, and you're already responding before you're done listening. Someone looks at you in a strange way, and your mind has already built an entire narrative about what that means. A situation goes wrong, and your nervous system goes into survival mode before you have any concrete information. Reactivity is not a weakness of character, it's biology. Your nervous system was designed to react quickly to threats. That's what kept you alive in the savannas. The problem is that your brain doesn't know how to distinguish a predator from a WhatsApp message with a slightly drier tone than usual. So you react to emails as if they were lions. You collapse emotionally because of comments that someone made without even thinking. You spend hours mentally reconstructing conversations that would last seconds if you just hadn't reacted. Jesus had trained, and that's the word trained, a level of self-regulation that seemed supernatural because it was extremely rare. But it wasn't magic, it was practical. Notice the temple scene. Jesus enters and finds merchants and money changers transforming the Father's house into a market. And there is a detail that Juan records, and that goes unnoticed. He made a whip of ropes. This takes time. He didn't explode at the first emotion. He felt the indignation, a just, real, deep indignation, and yet he had time to make a whip, which means that between emotion and action there was consciousness. There was a choice. The action was not impulsive, it was deliberate. Indignation without conscience turns into destruction. Indignation with conscience becomes action with purpose. That's the difference between reactivity and response. And Jesus lived on the side of the answer. But the most brutal test was not the temple. It was the trial. Pilate asks, "Do you not hear how many things testify against you?" The Bible says that Jesus did not answer a word, and Pilate was greatly astonished. Imagine the pressure of that moment, false accusations being shouted, your life at stake, the possibility of defending oneself, of explaining, of convincing. And he was silent, not the silence of fear, the silence of choice, because there are times when responding is fueling the fire. And the wisdom of knowing when to speak and when to be silent is one of the most sophisticated forms of strength a human being can develop. How do you react when you are wrongly accused? When someone distorts what you said? When someone invades your emotional space and expects an explosion? Your reaction at that moment reveals how much the external world still has power over your internal world. The fourth pillar of an unshakable life is to build that space, that sacred gap between what happens and what you do with what happens. It is not passivity. It is not indifference. It's a form of power that most people will never know about because it requires an inner job that the world doesn't visibly reward. But Jesus knew. And the result was a level of presence and strength that even his enemies recognized, even unintentionally. When pain doesn't destroy you, it reveals you. There was a garden, and in the garden there was a man with his face on the ground. It is not a poetic image. It is the literal account of Luke 22:44. And in a more intense agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling on the earth. Medicine has a name for this: hematidrose. The rupture of blood capillaries in the sweat glands caused by extreme stress. It is a rare phenomenon, documented in situations of absolute terror, the body literally bleeding under the weight of what the mind is carrying. Jesus was afraid. He was dying. He was asking that hour to pass, that cup be taken away. And this detail, this moment of human and visceral terror in the garden, is the most important of the entire text, because what happens next is not a man who has overcome the pain. He is a man who went through pain with his eyes open. There is a huge difference between these two things, and most of us spend our entire lives trying to do the first and never learning how to do the second. Overcoming pain means avoiding it, numbing it, pretending it doesn't exist, working harder, drinking more, scrolling through the feed again, creating more distractions until the pain is small enough to be ignored. Going through pain means sitting with it. Look at her. Let her say what she has to say. And then, only then, move forward carrying what she revealed. Jesus did not ask for anesthesia in Gethsemane. He asked for the pain to be taken away, because it was human and the pain was real. But when the answer was silence, he didn't run away. He prayed even more. He deepened the encounter with what he was feeling instead of scraping the surface and walking away. And from there, from that encounter with the depths of his own agony, he got up. And it was with a serenity that confused the soldiers who came to arrest him, with a clarity that disarmed Peter when he cut off Malchus's ear, with a presence that made Judas retreat for a second, even with 30 pieces of silver in his pocket. The pain had not destroyed him. He had revealed it. And it changes everything about how you should understand suffering in your own life. Post-traumatic psychology makes a fundamental distinction. There is the trauma that paralyzes, and there is the post-traumatic growth. The difference between the two is not in the intensity of the pain. It is in the relationship that the person builds with this pain. People who avoid, deny, or get stuck in a loop with pain become paralyzed. People who can integrate the painful experience, find meaning, learning, revelation in it, emerge with a strength that did not exist before. Jesus was the absolute master of this integration. Look at his entire trajectory. 40 days in the wilderness. Hunger, loneliness, temptation. The result, mission clarity like never before. Rejection in Nazareth, the city where he grew up, by his own neighbors. Result, expansion of the ministry to regions that I had never planned to go. Judas's betrayal. The result, the most significant supper in human history on the same night. Each pain became a portal, not by magic, by a repeated choice, not to let suffering be the final word. And here's what most people will never hear in a Sunday service. Jesus wasn't strong despite his pains. He was strong because of them. The way he inhabited every loss, every rejection, every night in the desert, it was exactly what forged the level of inner depth that allowed him to stand up when it all came crashing down. Think about your life. The things that shaped you the most weren't the easy moments. Those were the moments when you thought you weren't going to survive, the breakup that devastated, the betrayal I didn't expect, the failure that humiliated you publicly. But the question is not whether you survived. The question is, what did it reveal about you? And did you stay with the revelation, or did you throw it away along with the pain? The pain you avoid controls you. The pain you go through releases you. Jesus knew this with a depth that went beyond philosophy. It was lived. He was incarnate. It was in the sweat of blood in the garden, in the back opened by the whips, in the voice that still found the strength to speak from the top of the cross. And what he said at that moment, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do," was not weakness disguised as goodness. It was the ultimate demonstration of someone who went through so much pain that he arrived on the other side transformed. Free from the poison of hatred, free from the prison of resentment, free with a freedom that no crucifixion could take away. This is the fifth pillar, and it is the most difficult, because no one wants to sit with the pain, but it is exactly there, in that uncomfortable place you have spent years avoiding, that your true strength is waiting for you. The secret that lies before all words, we have reached the end. And this is the pillar that unites all the others. It is also the simplest, and because it's simple, it's the easiest to ignore. In the whole gospel, in every decisive moment, before every great action, after every great pain, in the heart of every teaching, there is a word that appears without fanfare, without explanation, as if it were too obvious to need comment. The word is prayed, and Jesus prayed. Withdrawing to a lonely place, he prayed. He spent the night in prayer. He lifted up his eyes to heaven and prayed. Falling on his face to the ground, he prayed, not as a ritual, not as a religious protocol, not as the fulfillment of a spiritual obligation, like breathing, like the most natural thing in the world, as someone who knows that alone is not enough and is not ashamed of it. And here's the most beautiful paradox of all we've seen today. The most unshakable man who ever lived was also the most dependent. Not dependent on crowds, not dependent on approval, not dependent on favorable circumstances, dependent on something that no outside force could give or take away, a living, pulsating, constant connection to something greater than oneself. Modern psychology has discovered, through decades of research on human resilience, that people who recover better from trauma, who endure greater pressure without breaking down, who maintain mental health in extreme conditions, have one thing in common: a sense of purpose. The feeling that life has meaning beyond immediate circumstances. Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz and wrote, "He who has a reason to live endures almost anyhow." Jesus had the deepest reason a human being can have, and he renewed this why every day before dawn, in deserted places, in silence. Jesus' prayer was not a list of requests. It was a conversation. It was a repositioning. It was the deliberate act of remembering every day who he was and what he was here for. It was the moment when the noise of the world was put into perspective in the face of something eternal. And this daily repositioning was what allowed him to be thrown back into the chaos, the crowds, the traps, the pains, the betrayals, and not get lost. Because he knew where he had come from, and he knew where he was going. What happened in the middle was intense, it was real, it was human. But it was not definitive. Do you have this, elder? Do you have something, a practice, a belief, a purpose that is bigger than your bad day, bigger than your boss's opinion, greater than your account balance, bigger than the fears that appear at dawn? If you don't, you'll continue to be thrown by circumstances, not because it is weak, but because a life without an anchor drifts, always, inevitably. And the anchor of Jesus was not an abstract idea, it was a living relationship. It was the honest recognition that there was a limit to human capacity, and that beyond that limit there was something that made up for what was lacking, not as weakness, like wisdom. Look at everything we saw today, the identity that does not depend on approval, the silence cultivated in the midst of chaos, genuine presence with others, the space between stimulus and response, the pain crossed instead of avoided. All of this together forms a structure, an internal architecture. The building of a person who doesn't break when the wind blows, not because he doesn't feel the wind, but because the roots go too deep. And the deepest root of all is this: knowing that you are not alone in the process. That there is something that precedes you, sustains you, and exceeds you, and that accessing that something is not weakness, it is the bravest and smartest gesture a human being can make. Jesus was not unshakable because he was perfect. He was unwavering because he practiced on a daily basis all these pillars, because he always returned to the source, even when he was exhausted, because he didn't expect to feel strong to pray. He prayed until he felt strong. And when the darkest moment came, the cross, the abandonment, the death, he had roots deep enough to endure what no other root could have. You will not face Golgotha, but you will face your own crosses, their own Gethsemanes, their own betrayals. And the question that this entire video was built to ask you is this: when that happens, will you have roots? Construction begins now. Not when the storm comes, now. On the ordinary day, on Tuesday, it was dull. In the silence of the dawn that you could use to scroll the feed, but you will use from today on to go deep into yourself. Because the strength that you seek on the outside all your life, it is inside. It always has been. Jesus was only the first to show us how to get to it.